Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Not so long ago, I did a couple videos about the Batmobile story. A guy makes licensed replicas of the Batmobile from the original television series, and his company is in the Midwest. And a gentleman out in California ordered a car from him, and then later got upset about how long it was taking to get that car. And from various reports I heard in the news, he had filed a lawsuit in California against the guy. And the judge in California said, this case doesn't belong in California. You need to sue the guy where he is, over there in Indiana. And so shortly thereafter, in the news, police officers from California went to Indiana and while there got search warrants and so on, working with local police, and then went in and raided the Batmobile shop. And a lot of people were wondering how appropriate that was for the police in California, on the taxpayer dime, as they say, to go to Indiana and raid the shop because a customer was unhappy with how long the process was taking. And then the report is that the police then filed the documents and paperwork so that charges could get lodged against the man in Indiana, but in California. And so there's a whole lot of uproar over this, a lot of stories going back and forth. And I mentioned in one of my videos that I actually spoke to the guy who runs the shop that makes the Batmobiles, because he had some answers to some questions I'd raised in my first video. And then quite a few people have sent me updates saying, Steve, it looks like the case has been dismissed. But what had happened was one of the hearings had been adjourned, but it had not been dismissed yet. But we have a slight update here because some people had suggested that the Attorney General of California look into the actions of the sheriff in California who sent his men to Indiana. But the headline here from KGO and Dan Noyes, who's been reporting on this story all along, about the Batmobile raid, California Attorney General declines to investigate San Mateo County Sheriff's actions. So the AG of the state has decided not to do anything. And they said that this doesn't come as a surprise to many people involved, but it is a setback for the Batmobile garage owner. So the ABC News I-Team first told you about the San Mateo County Sheriff sending a team of investigators to raid the Batmobile garage in Indiana. And the police did that in conjunction with the local police. So they didn't just, California cops, go to Indiana and break in someplace and do an investigation. They went there, got some local police to accompany them and do it that way. The central question, of course, in the story, was it proper for the San Mateo County Sheriff to send 4 investigators to raid the Batmobile garage in Indiana? Now, the sheriff admits he did that after a wealthy realtor who donated to his campaign called him upset that the Batmobile he had ordered had been delayed. So he'd ordered the Batmobile, cost $210,000. He's upset with how long it was taking, so he called the police. San Mateo County Board of Supervisors president told the I-Team in August, "It looks to me, and I think to most citizens, like this is really kind of a civil matter." And by the way, if you or I call the police and simply say, this person ripped me off, 99 times out of 100 they'll say it's a civil matter. Sue them, because they have more important things to do. The presidents of the county asked the Attorney General to review the sheriff's handling of the case. How this rose to a criminal matter, I think the public justifiably wants to know. And I think we have a responsibility to get to that answer for the public. Now, we have an answer. The Attorney General will not investigate, telling the county, although your letter identifies notable concerns, it does not allege that the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office committed a crime. While the California Department of Justice has the authority to oversee the sheriffs and district attorneys, the department only takes that extraordinary step when there is a compelling need. So KGO asked Mark Rakeup, who owns the Batmobile garage, for his reaction on Friday, and Mark said, "I'm very disappointed. I really had high hopes that this would be a turning point." Rakeup doesn't know if he can get a fair shake in San Mateo County given the close personal relationships of officials involved there. The state attorney general, meanwhile, had endorsed the sheriff in his losing campaign this year. And keep in mind that we were talking about how the sheriff who was overseeing this raid in another state is a lame duck sheriff. At the time he authorized the raid, he knew he was no longer going to be in office when his term ended. So a special assistant attorney general had reviewed the Batmobile banner as a result. And meanwhile, he used to work for San Mateo County District Attorney Steve Wagstaff. And Wagstaff frequently appeared at campaign events with the sheriff who's on his way out. And they had both donated money to each other's campaigns. So it's one of those things where it looks like it's a small enough place where everybody knows everybody. But here's the thing. The irony here, this is irony, for those of you who study the word irony, who complain about the Alanis Morissette song. Here's the irony, is that the AG of California says, we looked at this, and it actually doesn't rise to the level of something we should get involved in. And what they were looking at was what the sheriff did. When the sheriff was approached by somebody who said, hey, I think I've been ripped off by somebody in Indiana. And the sheriff should have said, that's not something I can get involved with. And so that is ironic, because the AG is probably doing the right thing here. I know many people are going to say, Steve, come on. AG should have stepped up and done something here. Remember what they said. What's the alleged crime? What crime are you alleging that the sheriff committed? Now, I am 100% on the side of Mark Rakup and his business, Fiberglass Freaks, and I support them 100%. And what happened to him was wrong. But the question is, did the sheriff commit a crime by sending his people to Indiana to execute the search warrant in conjunction with the local police? And what I believe happened there was what we call overreach. Overreach, meaning that he's doing something he shouldn't do, but it doesn't rise to the level of a crime. And that's the whole point. If the police had broken into Fiberglass Freaks without a search warrant and taken stuff, yeah, we could talk about that all day long as a crime. But they went to the local police, then they went to a local judge, got warrants, and went in and executed on the warrants. And so there haven't been any allegations of laws being broken. It just looks like the cop is overreaching. That is the sheriff who in California says, oh, you want me to investigate a company in Indiana who you could sue in Indiana, but you don't feel like it? Sure, I'll send some cops out there on taxpayer money, put them up in hotels, fly them around a little bit, give them rental cars and all that, spend all this money chasing down a debt that a local person's got allegedly against a business in Indiana. And so I didn't see the actual letter that was sent to the AG's office, and I'm not even sure if that got made public. But the point is that the allegation would have to say there was a crime committed. And so what the sheriff did, in my opinion, was wrong, but I think it was overreach, and simply he's doing something that, number one, he wouldn't have done for somebody else, and number two, no sheriff would do that and say this is reasonable. But there's the friendship issue there, which looks a little unseemly, and there's the lame duckness of his time in the sheriff's office. So he's on his way out, and a friend asks for a favor. That's what it looks like. But does that make it a crime? And the answer is no. So the AG is not going to look into it, which is unfortunate. I wish they would just kind of go in and poke around a little bit. But as it is right now, there had been a hearing scheduled on this case, and it got adjourned. And I don't like to predict the future often because, it's a difficult game to play. But if I had to guess what's going to happen here is I suspect the prosecutors are waiting for that sheriff to get out of office, go away, and then they can quietly dismiss the charges. And they don't have to worry about that impacting any of their other cases. And you might say, Steve, how would that impact other cases? Well, remember that the prosecutor has other cases with that sheriff, presumably. And everybody's got to get along if they want to, have cases go smoothly. And so while they've got a bunch of other cases in their office that depend on cooperation with that sheriff, they're going to play nice. But I suspect that somewhere down the road, these charges will simply get dropped, and they can drop them as quietly as they want. The news will pick up on it, and we'll hear about it, and I'll do a follow-up on it. But as of right now, the AG of California is not going to investigate, and the charges are still pending, but I don't even know if there's any more hearings scheduled at this time, and it looks to me like some people are trying to run up the clock. So Mark Rakeup, as of right now, is just simply waiting to hear what happens. Company's fiberglass freaks, and they do amazing work. And I've talked about some of the other videos. I'll put a link to one of the other videos below. But he was making replica Batmobiles. And DC Comics, who owns the rights to the Batmobile design, sent somebody out to his shop, in essence, like to spy on him, to see what he was doing there. And instead of coming back and saying, we should shut this guy down, he's knocking off our cars, they said, we should line up with this guy and work out an endorsement deal because the cars he's making are so good that we should put our name on them and make them the officially licensed Batmobiles. And that's the deal they worked out. I can tell you that these things are perfect replicas of the Batmobile. And of course, the Batmobile is iconic in the field of automobiles. So that's the story with the update. I got it from Peter, Gerald, and M. Just like the band that did pop music. Of course, M was actually a guy, but I believe he just referred to the act as M. So, Batmobile raid, California Attorney General declines to investigate San Mateo County Sheriff's actions. Dan Noyes reports that for KGO, and will continue to follow the story and root for Mark Rakeup, who I believe has done nothing wrong from what I've seen in the news. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Don't find fault. Find a remedy.